Welcome back, students. In today's video, we'll be talking about layouts, and we can understand that layout is one of the most important uh, concepts in CSS because it is based on the layout that the page design comes up, and there are different formats of layouts. We have box layout, which is the basic one. Then we have flex layout, then grid layout. There are many concepts which we have to understand for that. Now, today we'll be starting box layout, which is the most commonest format of layout in CSS, which we generally use. So, let's start. Now, today, first of all, we need to understand the box model of CSS layout designing, where the contents are positioned using some properties. And by the setting of such properties, we can position our contents in a particular area of a website. Now, each and every property works in a different way actually. Now, we have different layers of component properties which we have. Now, every layer will have a different positioning um, scheme, you can say, but every property works in a different way and positions the item with different spacing. For example, the innermost content will be enclosed with different layers of properties maybe, and that is what box layout is all about. And apart from the display of a particular component in the web page, a box layout generally indicates how the content positioning will be done, and so on. Now, this is the what we have discussed is this box model is one of the most commonest way of positioning items. But we have more of them like flex grade, and many more. But box model is the most commonest means of positioning it. Now, the basic model, if we talk about the basic model structure is we can understand with this image, like the content is somewhat which is guarded inside, and all the layers which are formed are outside one by one, packing the content in. Now, the most commonest format is there is one innermost padding and outermost margin, and in between the padding and margin we have the border. Now we generally identify that border is the outermost layer of content. So your content can be an image, it can be a division, it can be a component of the website, but surrounding the content will be three different layers, and each and every layer has a different name to it. Now, that is where this box layout comes into play. The box layout has this particular type of look, and we can obviously have a side information about each and every layers which we have. Like for example, a padding, border, margin will have four sides. Okay, and each and every side we can add a particular size to it. We can positioning the items according to the item size, the item width. For example, the uppermost layer is called as the top. This is called as the left. This is the right, and this is the bottom. Now, this is commonly same for padding, border, margin, and all the other types of layers. So that is what we will understand. Once we take up the practical part, we'll be dealing with that, and in the practical session, we'll be understanding them in a in-depth manner. Now, what we understand here is that each layer represents a different part of the model. For example, padding is a different segment, border is a different segment, margin is a different segment. Now, each and every segment has to be has to be positioned, has to be specified with the property values, and accordingly the content positioning is made. So layer by layer, each and every content is added with layer information, and each and every layer information will help the content to be positioned in a particular space, okay, of the website. Now, as we can hear that the size can be according to the requirement of the designer, and it can be a symmetric design, it can be an asymmetric design. Now, depending upon your requirement, you can have the left side more spacious than the right hand side. Okay, so the left and right can have equal distance, can have more or less distance depending upon the size and shape. We can specify the values of each and every property. But one thing is for sure, that whether it is padding or border or margin, everybody will have a left portion, a right portion, a top and a bottom portion, right? Now, let us go inside the layers one by one and try to understand which particular property will have a effect on the content positioning. Now, first of all, we need to talk about the padding. Now, padding is something which is in between. For example, this is the content. For example, we have an image, and we want that image to be displayed with a border, right? Now, the space in between the content and the border is actually referred to as the padding. Now, we can either skip the padding, that is, we can specify a padding value of 0, or we can specify the padding so that we can add a text to it at a particular position. Now, it's totally dependent on the type of component which we have, and do we require a padding for that or not. So, padding is something which is very simple. It is the space in between the content and the border. So, in between the content and the border, the inner space will be referred to as your padding. Contrary, when we talk about a border, border is actually the outer limit of the content. Now, border can be identified by a particular you can say it is the divider line between the padding and the margin. So, it divides between the margin and padding. So, margin is something which is the outer rim, the outer space. Padding is the inner space, margin is the outer space. And in between the padding and margin, you can specify a border. That is, you can enclose a border with which can have a particular size, which can have a particular color, which can have a particular type of border line. Now, we'll be elaborating them more when we come in, when we give that particular example of respective layers. So, when we go to the padding section, we'll be describing them. When we'll come to the border section, we'll describe them. And moreover, we'll also come to the margin section. Now, border property can be easily set, because this is one of the properties in CSS which is maximum used, and it is used to style the outer area of a component, a content. So, somehow maybe we leave the padding, we leave the margin, but border is somehow specified so that it can provide us the outer area of that particular content. Okay. So, we will be looking into the border property with examples today only. The last is the margin layer, which is the outermost layer, and it is generally called as the space between the border and all other content. For example, if I am talking about the outer an image is surrounded by text, let's say, and the outer border and the text, I want a space in between them, then it's better that we provide the margin for that particular content. So, in a very simple way, we can understand that each and every area which is being displayed in the website can be referred to as a content. But every content will have an insidemost space called as the padding, followed by the outer rim called as the border, and then after we'll have a distance between the border and the outer contents, which is referred to as the margin. Now either we specify the margin or we not, either we specify the padding or we not, either we specify the border or we not. But based on these property layers, we can exclusively position a particular content. Apart from this, there are two different properties we should also discuss, and that is the float property and the display property. Display property is something which actually displays the content on the website. If we don't want to display the content, or we want to hide it, or we want to make it invisible, then we'll use the display property and do something on that. And float is something which aligns the content in a particular position, either in the left side or in the right side. So we'll look into that also. Okay. So let us have a practical demonstration on this box model. And the main advantage or feature which we'll be discussing today are the layers of it. So let's go on. So let me start the page first. We have it in the project section. Let me first set up the page. So this is our HTML page, and let me first introduce an image here, because that is one thing which I need to do. Why not download one? Landscape images. It will not take much time, because generally in order to give this example, we'll be using a landscape image for our own. Okay. Let's save as. How much time does it take to download just a view? Okay, let's just see whether I have any images or not. Okay, let us use one picture like this. Okay, just copying this, placing it inside my D drive. That is the same location where my images and all the files are stored saved. So that is where I'll save the projects. I'll create a small folder here and I'll name it as IMG. And inside this IMG, I'll just paste it and rename this file as img1.jpg. Okay, that's fine. Now let's come back to our code. This is my image. Here I want it just after my uh, what is HTML, the link is there. Just after the link, I want that image to be here. So img src equals to double dot slash img slash img1 dot jpg. Okay. Currently, I will create a class for this. So class equals to html image. Okay. Now let's do whatever we feel like. I'll just save it here. I'll bring back my okay. So this is the image here, right? So it is completely displaying the content. Now what I want is there are certain things which I want to change here now. Number one, the class name is image. What is the name of the class? HTML image. Okay. So HTML image. Let us first decide the width and height. So height can be like 300 pixels. Generally the height becomes fixed, and we can either specify the height in px, that is pixel, or we can give a vh for it also. Okay, so let it be px for now, and then width can be 70%, or we can give vw for this if you want. So currently the width and height is something like this, and it is just coming after the link, Google link, and therefore it is the display is somewhat inline. Okay, the display is somewhat inline. I'll talk about inline display and about a block display in a moment's time. But currently, what I have is an image, and that image is being displayed just after the link, and it has a particular width and height. Now what I need to have is I need to display this particular, so it will have a particular margin of itself, a padding of itself, and so on, right? So go back to my styling. Now there are certain things I would like to do. The first thing is I would like to add the border. Now why border? Because border is something which is in between the padding and the margin, and it will help me to make you understand the difference between the two. Now border can be individually specified, that the border width, then border size. Generally we have the following things. Number one, the size, which is the first thing which you have to specify, then a space, then we have to give the style, the style of the line, line style in other words, and thirdly the color. So generally a border has these three things to be specified: the size, the style, and the color. Now what I will be doing, I'll be first specifying the size in pixels, right? So it can be 2 pixels, but better is something different. I'll just start with 2 pixels now. Then the the type of style can be solid, and the color can be a hash color, can be a normal color. We can give a red color maybe. Now if I save it now and just refresh it, you can easily see that there is a border coming up, right? So the content is my image and the border is a 2 pixel border, which is a solid line, and the color is red. Now there are certain changes which you can do now. First of all, we can give the size as 10 if I want. Now obviously the size will change. It will be bigger now, and as per your size value, the border size will now change. Now if I come back to the original format of 2 pixels, and instead of solid, if I specify dashed, now saving and running, now you can understand that now the value will become dashed, or it can be dotted. All the different types of line size can be specified. If I give a size of, let's say, 5 and then run it now, you can easily find out that okay, this is my dotted now. Now you can have a dash dotted. I think it's not work. Okay, I'll come back to the solid ones. Okay, so my color is red, and now it will be showing. Yeah, now it is showing the border is filled. Now after this border, let me add some padding. Now when I add padding, padding can be specified in one of the following ways. First of all, the top, then right, then bottom, and then left. Okay. So let me give a different value for the different area so that it can be understood. So let's say 20 px can be my top value. Then 40 px can be for my right side value. This is my right value. Then 60 px for my bottom value, and 80 px for my left value. Now this is padding. Now padding comes in between the border and the content. So this is my image. So this will be my content, and the border is in red color. So if I give this and then save, then automatically you can easily see that the spacing is now coming in between the border and the content. So this is 20, this is 40, this is 60, and this is 80. Now if I want a general border, like for example, I want padding on the top and bottom equal and left and right as equal. So for that I need to specify only two values. Now what should I do? If I specify only two values, then 20 will be not only my top but also my bottom, and 40 will be not only my right but also my left. So if I save it now and run, so it will have an equidistance. See, 20 is my top and bottom distance and 40 is my left and right distance. Now if you want everything to be uniform, right, uniform, so for that you can specify them two equally. So 2020 will now indicate that top and right both at 20. Similarly, bottom and left will also be 20. So let me run now. So we now have an image with a padding value of 20 px and a border of 5 px as the line size. Solid is the line type and red is the color of the line which is bordering it. Now let's move in to the third important layer, the most important layer, that is the margin. Now if I say that okay, I want to set margin, the margin and padding will have a general difference, like if you can, padding is the inner space, margin is the outer space. So if I specify 20 px here space and then 40 px here, so 20 will be my top and bottom margin and 40 px would be my left and right margin. Okay, so if I save it, and so you can see that this particular space and upper space. So the Google link is now displayed 20 pixel below, right? So that is my bottom and top margin. Now individually can also be specified. You can also specify them individually if you want. For example, for padding section, there are three different properties like padding right, top, left and bottom. You can specify them separately. Okay. Similarly, for border color, border image, border right, border radius, border bottom. So everything you can specify in a separate manner, right? And for margin also, there is margin top, margin right, margin left, margin bottom. So all can be specified separately as well. But we generally follow it in a general way, so that all the values can be specified in a single go. Okay. So this is your margin. Okay. Now let's talk about two important properties. One is your display property. Now first of all, let me talk about display. Now if I say display none. Now none means I want to remove the display now. I don't want anything to be displayed. This image will be totally invisible now. So if I refresh, now it gets totally eradicated. That space is gone, the value is gone. So none is a value which, when specified for the display property, that means that thing should not be displayed at that position. Now display has a different value also. Now currently the display format was inline. If I talk about go to inline, save it, display. So this is how it was being displayed in the previous section. Okay. So whenever we go to display and we don't specify any property to display, then the default way of display is inline display. So everything will be as it is. The content will be displayed on the same spot where all the contents are being displayed in a general way. But if I specify a block value, this means that this would be displayed now in a different area. It will not have any other contents displayed on that particular spot. So we can see that Google link is being displayed, right? And just on the right hand side we have the image. But if I now refresh, you can see that a block display is something that I will come and nobody else can be displayed on this particular line. So this is something like only I will be there and nobody else can come into my space. So block display and inline display, these are the two different displays which we have at hand. So inline display is something like I can be displayed along with other contents, and block display is something where the content is to be displayed as a separate content in a separate line, and no other display can be there in that particular spot. This is your block display. Now there is another method where it is called as inline block. Now this means that now when I display it, let me save and run the code. This is somewhat similar to what we have in inline method, but it has all the features of block. Okay, so block display is something which is different, inline is totally different, and inline block is something a mix between the two, right? We generally don't do that. We generally either specify stick to inline display or we stick to block display, right? One thing more, if the display is block and the size has been miniaturized somehow, for example, this is my width and height, and there is one thing which I would like to discuss now, that sometimes depending upon the size and shape of the screen, the image may seem somewhat distorted. You can see that here it is being distorted, right? Now, how the image will look, how the content will look, how the page content will look in different images in different devices, for that we have a different idea. We can right click on the browser, especially on Chrome. We can go to inspect, and there is a button on the bottom called as this button. This is called as your device toolbar. Now when I click on this, this will toggle in between the two different responsiveness pages and the normal display pages. Now if I click on here once, you will be displayed with different dimensions. Now I can select the particular type of display which I want to do. For example, I can select a particular phone or a tab or a particular shape device, and then there we can see that okay, how it looks here. Now for example, Galaxy Fold, now it is looking like this. Okay, so if I go back and say okay, no, let me display it on an iPad mini, so this it will display like this here. So here it looks good, but when I come back to my website, now this image looks pretty bad. Why? Because the width and height has the ratio, the image and height, width and height ratio is somewhat gone bad. So the best way to do it is resize according to your size specification, do your coding, right? One thing more, now if it is displaying in a block way, so somewhat different. Now what I want here is, okay, let me first, yeah. Now one feature is there called as float feature. Now when you specify float, you need to specify which area you want to float. Either you can float it on left side or you can float it on right side. Now what happens if I float it on right side? Let us see and then we'll understand it better. So I have saved it, I have refreshed it. Now when I float it on the right side, automatically the content is displayed on the left hand side. If I specify the width as 50% and then try to save it, now 50% of the image is floated on the right side, that will it will be displayed on the right side, and all the other contents are being displayed alongside on the left hand side. Now this is something when we can display a content along with the images. So float property and display property are two important factors which will be playing around in the next videos. But simple way of doing so, the simple way of designing, the simple way of displaying the contents on a website can be done easily using a box layout. And the only three layers which we have to deal with is the most outer margin, the in between border, and the inner padding. So padding, border, and margin can be handled very carefully, and we can easily manage the layout of that particular content. Okay, so I hope that you have understood this box layout, and in the next video we'll be looking into the properties of flex layout, how flex box can be used. It is somewhat an advanced segment, and the most commonly used is box, but we do use flex and grid for our own benefits also. So we need to understand them too. So that's it. Thank you.